Hello? Yeah. Yeah, I heard you need a little bit of help with your procrastination when it comes to your hobby or probably other areas of your life. You're in the right place. So, I want to give you the free first 10 minutes of the Hobby Procrastination Rescue Kit because I know how daunting this can feel and almost frustrating to the point where you're like, I just don't think I'll ever be able to be the person who can show up consistently for myself, for my hobbies, without some type of like crazy urgency or almost like punishment to yourself or overscheduling yourself into the grave. Like, let's be honest, we don't need more alarms in our life. It's gonna be the first 10 minutes of the first video of the 3-part series that is so helpful that you can be able to show up more for yourself even by next week by learning how to work with your brain instead of against it with actual techniques I've never seen be taught anywhere. And to help finally dispel the myth, you are not lazy, you are not inconsistent. Our brains are just wired differently, and we need to figure out how to work with them. So all you have to do is continue watching this video, and if you want to learn even more, go into the rescue kit where I can help you even further. Let's dive in.
So you didn't do your hobby. This is not meant to be a call out, but this is mainly just to show you that I understand. It's the phrase that I've done many a time that a lot of people who I know and who are part of this community know very well, which is that even though there's things like this where you want to enjoy, you're still not showing up for them. And there's reasons why. And I want to show you what those reasons are in a really laid out way that you might not have heard before. So because I know that our brains just need to get into stuff fast, I'm going to take that with us. But before we do, I'm going to have you actually pause me. And what I want you to do right now is write down everything you've done today. It is called a to-done list. There's a scientific reason for it, and I'm not going to bore you with it right now because I care more about you actually doing it. I'll tell you after. So what I want you to do, pause me for the next 60 seconds, put an alarm on or even put on a song and write down everything from I made my bed today, I made a meal, I finished writing an email, I woke up, I went pee, whatever it is, write that down, all of it now. Okay? So pause me, and we're back. Take that with you. The list does not matter. What you wrote does not matter. But what you just did is going to help us in the final part of this. So, this is actually something that our brains need because you might be someone who's similar to this post where I'm going to move myself down actually. Okay. So you might be someone who identifies with this post, which is like, I've never found an anti procrastination strategy that actually works. And the irony of all these things, like they're meant to help out, make a schedule, but I don't do it. Do a Pomodoro, but I get bored. Eat the frog first, which is still always a weird phrase to me. Like you never do. Do the easy test first. Okay, that kind of helps, but not every day it works for me. And this kind of like runs circles and circles and circles to where it feels like there's truly no type of tip or strategy that's ever going to work for your brain. It feels like you're broken or that there's just something that's missing. And this is not to replace any form of like medication or therapy when we're talking about like strategies that work for you and don't work for you. But if you're hitting a lot of these like kind of like the best practices and still not seeing a result, there's usually an underlying reason. Now there might be more than one, especially if there is again medication or chemical imbalances involved, but I'm going to speak to the majority. And this is kind of the biggest thing here is that if you're having that thing happen where you've ticked off multiple times or you've tried multiple tactics that you've heard from others on how to show up for your hobby, show up for habits, this becomes less of a how and more of a why than the strategy or tip doesn't work. Because we're going to talk about the how in part 3, but the why is going to actually make the how a lot easier and let you actually find a how that works for you. Find a strategy so that this post does not become your reality, does not continue being your reality if you identify with this right now. So I want you to realize that's why we need this. Now, in terms of procrastination does not equal laziness. I think, unfortunately, the mainstream, I would say previously to 5 years, but even before that, if you weren't doing the like 9 to 5 and 5 to 9 and then doing every single hour planned out, it meant that you were lazy and you didn't know what to do. No. The thing about procrastination is there is a real reason behind it. There's a couple actually, and we'll talk about those 3. The biggest thing, if you were to run away, if you were to leave this training and kind of take something with you, is that procrastination does not equal laziness. Procrastination, I cannot say that word for it for some reason. Procrastination is about how our brains prioritize tasks and prioritize in general. Procrastination equals differing priorities and the feelings and meanings we make around them. Now, for a lot of people who are non-HD or even, the traditional people who don't struggle with this, which if you've bought this program, you do. So even if you're not ADHD, you can still struggle with procrastination. But for some people, it's easy as I'm just going to study at a later time and it means nothing about me and I'm going to be great. Like, I'm just living life. I can trust myself and I have that consistent motivation. I don't have executive dysfunction. I'm good to go. Fortunately, for a lot of us who are ADHD or creative people, that's not the case. And it's not because we're anything bad or wrong with us. It's just our brains are wired differently. And instead of letting that become something that is a meaning about us, that it's somehow bad of us, instead realizing that our brain just needs something different. And that's okay. But a lot of times we're pushed down that if we don't hit those things, if we don't like eating the frog or waking up early. Like, I can't imagine waking up at 4 a.m. Like, those people, I have a lot of friends of mine who are early birds. Can't imagine. People who do the eat the frog first literally cannot imagine. But that's because our brains are wired differently. And if you can really take to realize laziness was actually created during the Industrial Revolution, it was not something that was ever even a term previously to the 1900s, helps you see how our society literally is not meant to help us, especially in this capacity. So, 3 things to know before we try and do a hobby again is the 2 types of procrastination, the 2 priorities are like differing priorities, and the wall of awful. There's 1,000 more factors and reasons we could talk about it, but these are the 3 main things that will matter most when you're trying to approach the hobby again. And this could be a new hobby too, just anything around like habit and not showing up. Now, first, I'm going to throw my face over again. One day I'll remember to put myself in the right place. So there's 2 types of procrastination. The first one's active procrastination. Now, this is a credit I'll give to How to ADHD. It's a YouTube channel, really helpful. They've been around for a long time. She makes really cute little videos. And this was a really great concept I wanted to bring into you. So there's active procrastination, which is intentionally delaying tasks for a sense of urgency later. So you've probably done it before. I did it many a times in college where I would literally wait until I think the night before, sometimes a night or 2 before, to write the essay last minute. Granted, it matters, I think I would usually get around a B or so, and I was okay with that. But you'll notice that active procrastination, it is not coming from a place of shame or guilt, like, oh my gosh, I'm mad at myself or I feel guilty for doing it. You're just like, no, I just know I'm gonna do it like the night before it happens, and like use that urgency to my favor without making anything meaning about myself. And that's really important, that part we're gonna talk more about. Same thing is if you have, let's say you want to clean your house and you realize you're going to have a friend over, at 12. Well, you're probably going to wait until 11 to do it because you have your friend creating the urgency for you to do it. But you're not doing it from a place of shaming yourself, feeling that it's bad that you waited. You're just like, no, I just know I'm going to do it beforehand, or that'll trigger at least your brain to remember to do it beforehand. And there's no meaning behind it. It's just like, it's just happening then. And I know that about myself. Versus passive procrastination. My goodness. Okay, guys. So the other one is for passive procrastination. This is where you actively avoid the task altogether. So people who, do video games, I'm not a gamer. I'm more of a TikTok scroller. Well, at this time, we'll see if TikTok is still around. But I am a scroller or YouTube and Hulu. I love a good TV show. So for me, that's always been my thing, was watch it. And in the back of my mind, keep thinking about how it's been, I've missed let's for the hobby. I haven't done the hobby in 2 weeks. It's been another day that I told myself I was going to do it, creating more shame anxiety, which makes you get double down on the passive procrastination. Because again, it's all passive. It's not like you're actively intending. You're not using the urgency to your favor. You're not being like, I'm going to do this at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. rolls around and you just continue doing the scrolling because in reality, you're like, I'm not thinking about it. I don't want to think about it. It's the head in the sand feeling. And if that's kind of where you're at, this is going to be really important because a lot of us fall into, and you can experience both of these. It's not like you're only doing one of them in your lifetime, but especially if it's around the hobby part, it's leaning towards passive procrastination. Now, this is just a recap in case anyone kind of loves a good screenshot type of thing to remember. Is active procrastination is the later gator. It's the urgency piece where it's there's actual studies that show with active procrastination, it is very similar to non-ADHD or non-procrastinators because it's kind of like a strategy in itself. There's no meaning or like bad behind it. You just know that you prioritize and know that your task will be done during that time. Passive procrastination is more of a stress coping mechanism that our brains are using and then creates this like cycle of anxiety and shame, and because you're shaming yourself of like, I didn't do this, I'm not good enough, and then it creates this part of the wall of awful. I know, fun word. Wall of awful. So this was actually created by Brendan Mahan. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. But the wall of awful is a really interesting concept because when we're talking about procrastination, it's not something we can actually physically see, right? Like I can't, if I say like I'm procrastinating, you can't see it beyond maybe my like if I had physical papers that would be stacking up. But it's very much a internal mental issue. So the hard thing is trying to explain to people why the procrastination is, it feels so daunting, why the task just feels like it gets worse and worse and worse. So this concept was the wall of awful created by Brendan when explaining about when we think about procrastination, and especially this like invisible thing of things should feel easier to start. I mean, especially with tasks like this that we enjoy, but we're not doing them. Like there's a reason behind it. And a lot of the times it's the meaning we make it, but it's also the emotions that are being tied now to that task. And a lot of those emotions start, and this wall starts by being built by failure, brick by brick. Each brick actually starts as a brick of failure. So for you, if you were someone who had, I wanted to do photography this weekend, or I wanted to finish my crochet thing on Sunday, but I didn't get to it, that creates a brick. But it's not the only brick that gets built. There's other bricks that get built because of that failure. So let's say this was something where you actually were doing it for a friend of yours. So I have a lot of friends of mine who do this for hobbies where they'll actually give it to their friends. Like for example, one of the hobbies that I'm trying to learn is cookie decorating because I would like to be able to give them to friends as gifts, not to like make money. But to do that means I have to have a deadline. Essentially, like this is someone's birthday. I can't really miss it. So if I end up missing, let's say I don't do it that Sunday, and that is already a brick of failure, that'll also create a brick of disappointment if I don't do it. Disappointment for myself that I didn't do, but also then it could be another brick of disappointment for people that I also let down. So maybe again, if the person knew, they could be let down by me not doing this, or it's a brick of worrying or self-doubt. And these other negative feelings build on top of that failure because we have to make that thing mean something about us. And then you begin to have this wall of awful, this, emotional wall that's in front of the task. So let's say the task is crocheting. You have this big wall now that is built by negative emotion, and it feeds off of that emotion because each time it just builds higher and higher and higher to where you are now looking at that task and have so much of this wall in front of you, you can't even imagine where to begin. And then you just keep procrastinating, keep pushing it away because that wall feels too daunting to mount. And the wall of awful now is blocking your task, blocking your hobby, even something that you enjoy doing. And to talk about the how of it and how we actually address that, we're going to address that more in part 2 and 3. But the wall of awful shows us that a lot of this comes down to our brain and how our brains are making it mean something about us when we don't show up for our hobbies, but also how our brains are creating different priorities than maybe what your current to-do list is showing, especially if you're someone who wanted to do, a daily reading or a weekly painting activity. This is where if you didn't show up for it, there's a clear sign that your brain has different priorities than you do right now.
So now you understand a little bit more about what's going on in your brain and also how to be able to learn how to use it and work with it. And that's going to be in part 2 and 3 of this 3-part video series that is really about the rescue kit of it all. Because at the end of the day, our brains are different. Even inside of the realm of multi-passionate or ADHD neurodivergent people, each brain inside of that term It's all different. Every technique is different and every day is different. There'll be times where I think I'm going to be able to stick with the same tactic every day, same playlist to cue me up, but I'll do it once and forget about it for 3 months. That happened yesterday. But it's because I have other tools in my toolbox, mental toolbox, so I can still show up even if I'm not using the same thing over and over again. Our brains crave novelty and newness, and we have to work with that instead of trying to push ourselves into something that's not going to work. So if you really want to learn how to fix this, and by fix I mean work with your brain and find a solution that works for you, join us in the rescue kit, or even further, go into the Hobby Club membership where you get this for free, along with the Hop Into Your Hobby framework and even more. I'll see you in there, and happy hobbying.